Hey, what's going on, everybody? Here's a quick shot of a tree near the river near my house. And I've painted this before, but I've painted it more from a distance. But my real purpose for doing this video is someone had asked if they could see my palette. When I mix colors, it's difficult to keep holding it up, so I came up with this idea here to kind of tack my palette to the board. And I'm painting this one in portrait mode so that you can better see mixing of the colors. I don't know how helpful it's going to be. I guess you guys can be the judge. So I've added my usual 3 coats of water to the paper, and now I'm doing a basic coat of raw sienna. And you can see most of the colors are dry. I mean, they are semi-wet, but I don't have enough water in my palette to where it runs too much. So now I'm just taking a little bit of neutral tint, little alizarin crimson, and I'm just doing a basic sky. The tree branches are going to kind of cover this, so I'm not going to be too intent on making a great sky here. Just enough to where you can kind of catch a glimpse in the background. Okay, so I'm using a little neutral tint and a little Payne's gray, and just to kind of create some clouds in the sky. It was a little bit of a cloudy day that day. And if you just dip the tips of your brush in the water, your Hake brush, you can kind of clean up some heavier areas and create some cloud effects. Use a little tissue to blot a little bit out. It'll dry nicely. It'll create a little bit of a clouded effect. And with a little light coming from behind. And just a little bit of ultramarine blue up there for some little blues. Just to introduce a little bit of blue into the sky. Not much. It'll be a nice effect when you have the tree with the branches against that. So we're going to take a little bit of cad yellow, a little ultramarine blue, and as you can see, I kind of mix the colors next to the colors that are along the edge and along the side. And I'm just going to do some quick sweeps in here to create some green areas of where the ground is going to sit. A little raw sienna here. Little burnt umber. I use a little Van Dyke brown too on my palette just to create a little variation. And I'm just going to do some background trees here. Just a little burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue, maybe a little too much. This was done while it was still kind of it's not winter, but it's not necessarily spring either. A little bit of raw sienna here, just to create some nice variation of colors there. Again with some browns and some neutral tint. And as you can see, that blue kind of is faded now, and it just looks like maybe there's something a little further in the distance back there. As you can see in the palette as I'm mixing it, they're moist paints, but they're not so wet that they're running down the palette. And there's not so much water coming off the brush that it's creating any sort of a cascade of water. The palette remains relatively dry. I hope showing this helps. I'm just taking a card here, scratching off some rocks, sort of on the shoreline here. And a little more blue, a little more cad yellow. And start working on the water. Our water here tends to look kind of greenish in our rivers. It's not blue water. And I probably overdid it a little here, so a little spray bottle just to kind of give it an initial wash. You can do, if you're doing this and following along with me, you can do it. If you want to make it more blue looking, it's up to you. I was staying a little more true to the photo. Again, a little more brown, a little neutral tint. In the corner, upper left-hand corner, I have Payne's Gray, and then below that I have a neutral tint. So if I don't want to go too gray or too dark, because neutral tint, Payne's Gray is essentially black with a little blue in it for the most part, depending on the manufacturer of the paint. I typically use Cotman, and I believe that's all that is. So you can end up getting way too dark with that. So neutral tint kind of darkens colors without making it look black. I use neutral tint from probably a couple of different suppliers. Just creating a little bit more green effects up in the upper area there. Daniel Smith is one of the ones that I use a neutral tint from. It's a good, they have excellent paints. They're a lot more than the Cotman, but you know, if you want very strong pigment, definitely Daniel Smith is good. Alright, so a little more burnt umber, a little more neutral tint, a little ultramarine. We're going to make a nice twisted tree. Now in that picture you saw in the beginning, there was maybe a tree behind the tree. I'm just going to stick to having one sort of twisted up tree here and use the hake brush for most of the branches. You take the hake and kind of twist the brush a little bit, and you can do some of the major branches with it. Now we can move over to the number 3 rigger brush, and we can do some more of the individual branches. And as you can see, even with that, there's water in the tray. Again, that was my main point for doing this video, was to show the mixing on the tray. You can see there's enough water there to create an inky sort of mixture, but it's not running down the palette. And that's the effect when you're doing heavier paints, as I use. They will rarely run. You'll be rarely doing anything that is that liquefied. If you were doing lighter, more delicate, transparent colors in your painting, then you're going to use more water, and you're going to end up with a wetter palette. A little bit of dry brushing for some branches there, and of course the card running down the trunk to give it some bark looking effects. A little dry brush around the bottom of the tree and the shoreline. Alright, so after a quick dry, the next thing is I'm making up a little bit of a greeny color to go over this water area here. And just testing it on a piece of paper. It's not a bad idea to have a piece of paper handy if you're not sure about certain colors. And I just kind of want to make that greeny effect in the water that, like I say, our rivers tend to have over here. probably more of a dark gray. I mean, unless it's really a clear day, the water rarely reflects the sky. And it's just a little too much, so I give it a quick spray. That's a good thing to have, is have a water bottle on hand. It really helps you keep things wet and open. Just adding a little gray here. This water was something that I fussed over a little bit. Probably could have left it a little bit more lighter. Something that you can do and leave it, if you're following along. Just working on that shore a little bit to kind of differentiate it from the water. A little dry brush. This will dry back a little bit too. And just a little card work to create some textures down there. And just darkened up that trunk just a little bit. As you can see, those branches and things, they contrast nicely against that sky in the background. And now we'll just put a few little leaves on the tree. And the brush should be pretty dry for this. Have a towel handy. And the drier it is, the more individual points of the brush that you'll get when you're doing leaves. If you want heavier blobs, then you're going to have a little bit more water. The drier the brush, the tinier the branches will be, from what I've discovered. And here, I don't want to do too much. I do want them small because I don't want to lose the sky completely in the background. As you can see, when you're doing this on the palette like I have, you use certain colors. You're never going to get them exact doing them this way because you're kind of mixing a lot of different things together. But it kind of does clean up your palette as you use certain things. And the idea here is that you're doing a lighter leaf and then darker leaves to create sort of the darker leaf areas where it's more condensed closer to the tree. Still kind of working on this water, trying to get it to where I want it by spraying it and keeping it wet. As long as you keep it wet, you can work it. I'm probably overworking it. This video, I don't know if I would necessarily have uploaded it, except for the fact that I had the palette tacked to the board. It's not something I'm going to do all the time, but because someone had asked if they could see my palette when I'm mixing. Again, if this is helpful, let me know. Okay, so that's it. Pretty close to being finished. I'm just going to put just a little darker spots of tone in the water area. After giving it a quick dry. So you can see now I've just darkened up the water a little bit, which I missed in videoing. But not much, just put a little extra in there. And just give it a quick sign. And then look at it with the mat on that I have on here. And just kind of get an idea of any little additions that you want to make at this point. Maybe add a couple little birds in the back there, just to give it a little life. And just give it a quick spray so I can put in just a little more texture with the card, just to kind of open the paint back up a little bit again. So I hope everyone enjoyed this video. It's not one of my greatest paintings, but I just wanted to give you an idea of mixing colors on the palette mainly. And again, just adding a little bit more to that shoreline. All right, so I appreciate everybody watching, and again, I hope the seeing the palette helped in some little way. And I do thank you for watching. Please comment and subscribe. I much appreciate it. This way I know you're out there. It encourages me with all the comments I've got to keep going. And have a good day, everybody. Here's the finished painting. Just a quick zoom in. I think it came out okay. I'm not 100% happy with it, but then again, I never am.